Hey guys, Sensei Jason, shorin-ryu.ca. Super stoked today to be talking to you in video number 2 of a multi-part series where we're focusing on some of the really cool stances that you see in styles of karate like shorin-ryu or matsubashi-ryu. In today's video, I want to focus on what's actually one of my favorite stances, which is the Naihanchi stance. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the stance, we're going to talk about how to do the stance, and we're going to just brush up on some of our technique, talking a little bit about some of the things that people do in the stance sometimes that maybe isn't correct. So stick around, please subscribe, leave your comments at the bottom. I'd love to hear from you guys, and let's get started. Naihanchi stance. Okay, so Naihanchi stance. Why do we know about it? Why is it such a prevalent stance in shorin-ryu and matsubashi-ryu and some other styles of karate? A lot of that has to do with the fact that this gentleman here, Motobu Choki, was kind of known and sort of had a lot of respect for this stance. If you know anything about Choki, he was actually born near Shuri. If you've ever been to Okinawa, you know Shuri Castle is there, and Shuri Castle, back when it was the where the ruling family lived, wasn't just the castle. There was Shuri Castle, but there was also an area around Shuri Castle that was known as Shuri. So back in, I believe it was 1870, Choki was actually born in Shuri. At that particular time, there was a lot of fighting, different schools sort of trying to prove that their school of karate was the school of karate. There were, you know, brawls happening between, you know, different practitioners of karate. Anyways, it was a bit of a rough time in Okinawa. The reason why Choki really liked the Naihanchi stance is that from his perspective, he felt like that stance really sort of emulated the stance that you might end up in if you were ever in an actual confrontation. He knew this because he himself was involved in many of these confrontations. And actually what's funny about Choki, or actually quite remarkable about Choki, is as the third son in his family, technically he wasn't even eligible to be taught his family's style of karate. He taught himself. So many of his skills were actually self-taught, and he started training when he was quite young, working out, lifting, exercising, because he had an affinity and he really loved martial arts, but he wasn't officially able to train. So he was self-taught, which I think is really super cool. So let's talk a little bit about the stance itself and some of the do's and don'ts. Okay, so Naihanchi stance. What does it look like? Well, it looks a little something like this, okay? Now, if you've practiced martial arts before, there's a stance that is quite similar to this stance. It's called Jigutai. And the main difference between these two stances has to do with what's happening with your feet. So in Naihanchi stance, you'll see that my toes are sort of pointing forward, straight forward. And in Jigutai stance, my toes are actually, or my feet rather, are actually on this sort of angle. And this is a very common Jigutai stance that you see in many styles of martial arts. But Naihanchi, as I said, your feet are sort of straight, more in this sort of straight configuration, but otherwise it's very similar. You're still sitting, trying to keep your back somewhat straight. You're not hunched over too forward like this. And the idea of this stance, just like many other stances, is you're supposed to feel quite rooted to the ground here. Full contact with the bottoms of your feet, weight evenly distributed, and you're supposed to feel quite grounded and quite rooted in Naihanchi stance. If you practice Naihanchi kata in your style of karate, you're probably familiar with the term Naihanchi ashifumi. And in the Naihanchi stance, some emphasis is put on using the legs as, well, not only striking, but also blocking techniques and sweeping. And Naihanchi ashifumi looks a little bit like this. So, let's say that I'm doing the kata, I execute a strike technique, and then there's this technique called Naihanchi ashifumi. And basically, what that is supposed to be, or one interpretation of what that is supposed to be, is someone trying to kick your leg, perhaps, or perhaps someone's trying to strike low, and you're using your leg to block that technique. Another interpretation of this could actually be a strike. So let's say that I have an opponent here and I'm looking to strike down on their leg. I can bring my foot up and come down and strike the opponent in the knee and hopefully incapacitating the opponent. So those are just a couple of interpretations of this technique called Naihanchi Ashifumi. Another variation of Naihanchi Ashifumi is instead of the leg actually coming horizontal and back down, the whole knee actually kind of comes up like this. That could be dodging a sweep, for example. Okay, someone's coming to sweep, you dodge, or again, a striking technique. I'm bringing my leg up and striking downwards onto the knee, onto the shin, onto the foot. So it could be a very effective strike. These are just some of the various leg movements that are incorporated into some of the Naihanchi kata that you might see. From a movement or stepping perspective, there's a very specific way to step in Naihanchi, and you've seen it most likely whenever you've seen someone doing a Naihanchi kata. And the way that we step back and forth in Naihanchi kata looks a little bit like this. First of all, it's important to understand that the Naihanchi stance is really meant for attackers who are coming at you from the side, or sort of maybe even on a bit of an angle. Not so much for attackers coming at you from a front direction. Okay, so with that in mind, the stepping would make perhaps a little bit more sense. So let's say I'm doing my Naihanchi kata, I end up in this technique. To move here to the side, I actually take my left foot, I place it in front of my right foot, and I'm sort of in this bent leg position. And then from here, I drop my heel, Naihanchi Ashifumi, and down. That's how we step in the Naihanchi stance. So at a little bit of a faster pace, it might look a little bit something like this. So I'm here, do my Naihanchi stance, I go to step. Okay, to go the other way, same idea, stepping through. Okay, so this is how we step in Naihanchi, back and forth, side to side, never forward and direct. This would be changing into a different stance. Really important to remember that. So Naihanchi, fighting, side to side. So when we're doing our Naihanchi stance, just like any other stance, it's important to remember that there are the right way to do things and the wrong way to do things. So I'm just going to point out some of the more common errors that folks make when they're trying to do a Naihanchi stance. And the cool thing about it is that these things are not very difficult to fix. They're fairly simple. So I'll point them out, and with a little bit of effort, you can easily correct some of these mistakes. So the first thing, I'll just get down to my Naihanchi stance here. So often what we see, and this is more in younger folks, what we see is they allow their disbursement to collapse a little bit. Okay, so a Naihanchi stance that perhaps started looking like this turns more into this kind of position. And the reason I think that people do this is because this is easier to do than this. This requires a little bit of effort here. You're having to keep your knees out, okay? You're having to ensure that you have a wide base and you're supporting yourself, and your muscles can get tired. So sometimes to rest, some folks allow their center or their disbursement to collapse a little bit and end up in this sort of stance. Probably not so good, because this makes your knee really vulnerable to a strike on the outside, and it's a huge bullseye target for someone. So try to avoid doing that. Try to keep your legs out, wide, and maintain your disbursement. Another common mistake we see in the Naihanchi stance is actually during the movement, the side-to-side movement. And again, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that trying to do it properly takes a little bit more effort. Okay, so the proper way, as I discussed earlier, to move in Naihanchi is you do this cross step. Depending on whether the Naihanchi Ashifumi that you're going to do is either going to be like this, or the knee's going to be coming straight up. So it could look like this and down. Okay, but sometimes in order to save a little bit of energy, we'll actually see people doing a bit of a sloppy Naihanchi Ashifumi. So they come through, and then it kind of looks a little bit like this, a little bit lazy. Okay, or if they're doing the bent knee or the horizontal knee position Naihanchi Ashifumi, maybe it doesn't come up all the way. sort of looks a little bit lazy like that. You want to try to avoid doing that. You want to try to execute a proper Naihanchi Ashifumi by either bringing the knee up as much as you can, or getting it as horizontal as you can, as quickly as you can. So it would look something like this. Stepping to the side. Okay, you want to put a lot of effort into that Naihanchi Ashifumi. Another common thing that we see in Naihanchi stance is people tend to lean too far forward in their stance. So, they might be doing Naihanchi stance, they got, their feet in a good position, they're managing to keep their legs, their disbursement quite wide in their knees, which is great. You want to have a wide base here. But then, for whatever reason, they tend to kind of stick their butt out a bit, and they're sort of leaning forward in this position. And, they'll do the entire kata almost in this sort of bent forward position. There's obviously a bunch of reasons why you don't want to be in this position. You're susceptible now or more susceptible now to falling forward, losing your balance. Okay, these are all things that obviously you want to avoid when you're doing your Naihanchi. So when you are doing your Naihanchi stance, try your best to keep your spine above your center of balance. Don't let your center of balance kick out to the back. Okay, you want to be aligned, proper, very stable here, and that's how you stand properly when you're doing your Naihanchi stance. Thanks guys for checking out video number 2 of our multi-part video series where we're covering all of the fundamental stances that exist within shorin-ryu, matsugashi-ryu, and many other styles of karate. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please post comments at the bottom. We'd love to hear your feedback. There are so many amazing topics to cover in karate. It's almost impossible to cover them all through an entire lifetime. So please post your comments and check out our website, shorin-ryu.ca. We've got an awesome blog with lots of really cool content. You can read a little bit about this man right here, Sensei Ihachi Ota. And we'd love to hear from you guys. If you're in the Oshawa area, come on in, check out the dojo. We'd love to chat with you guys. Stick around, check out a class, more than welcome. So once again, Jason, shorin-ryu.ca, and we'll see you guys next time.